Okay guys, hello and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about how to improve your comprehension in language. So we're going to be talking mainly about listening comprehension in this. I think reading comprehension is a similar kettle of fish, but I think what I'm saying is most relevant to listening comprehension. And I certainly do think that listening is the most important skill to learn when it comes to language learning anyway. And probably the most relevant for most people. So anyway, I'm going to start with some bad news, and that is the way most people go about improving comprehension is it's not necessarily the wrong way, but it's predicated on the wrong things. So what most people do when they want to improve their language level, and I've done this myself, trust me, I've done this a lot, is they will listen to stuff that is on their level. So stuff where there's about a 60 to 80% level of comprehension. And that's the main criteria by which they select what they listen to. And the logic behind this is that there's a sort of sweet spot where the language isn't too difficult, but it's also not too easy. So they're still learning lots of new vocabulary, and they're sort of exposing themselves to the language in a new way, but they've still got that grounding. They've got that 60% grounding of stuff they already know. That's sort of topped up by the 20% that they don't. There's a kind of timeless concept of the 80-20 rule. And I don't disagree with this. I think that it's best to consume content in this 60-80% bracket if you can find it. However, I think you only really reap the benefits of consuming content in the 60 to 80% comprehension bracket if your mind is genuinely engaged in the content that you're listening to. And for a lot of sort of comprehension, a lot of stuff that people are listening to, that because it's in that 60% to 80% comprehension bracket, is fucking boring, and they wouldn't listen to it if it wasn't in that comprehension bracket. I think no matter what level you're at, you need to be in a mindset where you're totally dissolved in what you're listening to. I think there's a sort of place that the mind goes to where it's totally dissolved in what's being said by the speaker. That is absolutely killer. So basically, the first thing I think you want to do in terms of consuming content and improving your speaking, in terms of improving your listening ability, is to find good things to listen to. So I would do away with a lot of starter materials, even if you're a beginner yourself. I think it's a bit of a red herring to do that kind of stuff. By all means, you're going to need to learn the language, you're going to need to study grammar and learn basic vocabulary and stuff like that, and if that helps you, sure. But I think the stuff that's really going to do the legwork when it comes to improving your comprehension is going to be stuff you're interested in. So I'll give you some examples of the kind of things I'm thinking of. So the first thing I'll say is don't listen to the news, for God's sake. Unless you're really interested in the kind of the current affairs of the specific country that speaks the language you're interested in. So let's say you're really interested in politics in Latin America, and you want to learn Spanish because you're interested in Latin American politics, something like that. Fair enough, that's good. And of a lot of speeches, you can't really dub speeches of politicians who are speaking Spanish or whatever language is. Sure, that's fine. But don't do this. You want to learn Polish, and so you just go onto Euronews Polish every morning and sit in front of YouTube, listen to some story that you could hear in your own language. Absolutely fine. I think that's a complete waste of time because your brain's just not engaged in it. And there's much better content to consume that is frankly less depressing and more interesting. So the first thing I would recommend is find films and TV shows in the language you're listening to. Because there's something magical about watching films that just really sucks you in. And if you haven't watched a film in a language that you don't completely understand yet, like, just give it a try and you'll realise how little it matters that you understand what's actually being said. So much of what sucks you in a film is just the music and the cinematography. And this will get you, like, if you allow yourself to be sort of wooed in by the cinematography and the whatever the music of the film, then you will enter, I think, that sort of stage where you're completely dissolved in what you're listening to and what people are actually saying in the show. So I had this experience when I watched Suburra, which is an Italian show, like the first time I learned Italian. And most of it I didn't understand. And to this day, like, a lot of it I look back at it, I'm like, I didn't really actually understand what was going on there. But it doesn't matter, guys, because I was so engaged in the visuals and the sort of acting of the actual characters. That's the other thing, like, you can tell great acting even if you don't understand the language. I was really so swept away by all these things. And that for me seemed to be way more important than actually, like, way more important thing for me enjoying the show. Like, to this day, like, I'll recommend the show to people just because I think it's so well choreographed. And to this day, I really put it down to the level I've reached in Italian in terms of understanding it. I put it all down to that. So the second thing you can go for is music. So finding good music in the language you listen to, the language you're learning. Now, again, like, be careful not to force it. If you can't find, if you don't really like a lot of Italian music, I don't really like. To go back to the example of Italian, a lot of rap music and a lot of Italian pop music. I really don't rate it. Like, I want to, but I just don't. It just doesn't get me into that flow state with it. So I don't bother. So definitely don't force it. But music is really good for switching on that sort of flow state you get with comprehending a language. So it's worth investigating, like, you know, if you're interested in learning a certain language, like exploring what sort of music is made in the countries that speaks the language, you know. Because if you find music that you really love, then it's a real in. It's a real in. I've had this experience with Russian, so I've listened to a lot of Russian, sort of Belarusian music, like Molchat Doma, Chernikovskaya Hata, like these kind of bands, and I've learned so much Russian from listening to these bands, just by, like, not even meaning to, just because it's got me used to the sounds and the sort of cadence of the language, and very quickly you start to pick stuff up. It's weird. I went to see Molchat Doma live one time, and there's one song they got called Tansavat, and the chorus is Ya neo mieu tansavat. Just that over and over again. And what that means is I can't dance, or yeah. And I think that's a great example of kind of how you can learn the language through music. Because I went to this gig in London, and everyone was just screaming out "Ya neo mio tansavat," which was so weird. It's like, how often do you get a bunch of English people speaking Russian? And so it's really cool. And I guarantee you guys, I would not have learnt Russian, like, I would not have understood Russian to the extent that I do now. Still at a very basic level, but if I hadn't actually enjoyed listening to it. So that really has to come first. So, okay, that's some ideas of stuff you can listen to. Spoken poetry is good. Other kind of things. Debates. It doesn't matter as long as it's stuff you really enjoy consuming anyway. And if you can't find that, anything that you enjoy consuming, anything that really gets you into that flow state, then I think you really got to ask yourself, and I'm not doing this as like a sort of rhetorical question, but like seriously, like why are you studying the language? Because the whole point of like the thing with language learning, what makes it, when it's at its most exciting, is that you're opening doors that are otherwise closed to you. And it's best if the doors that you're opening are like they're things you're actually interested in. You know, like you can actually go and watch an Italian film because you've spent the time studying it. You know, like that's what's going to keep you studying the language. It's annoying because I know how tempting it is to fall down this trap, but I think you have to study the language for something more than just, oh, I thought the language was cool. You have to have something solid that keeps bringing you back to it. And the other thing I think that's worth bearing in mind that's kind of a counter to this is every language has something. Like, unless it's some stupid made-up language that 200 people speak on Reddit, on some Reddit forum, like every language will have some kind of thing that is consumable in their language. Even if it's just it'll be really obscure. But every language has something, you know, like what do these people do? Like every sort of country wants to consume content that's relevant to themselves. And obviously, you know, English-speaking dramas and Netflix shows are really popular. But that doesn't mean that one's in the language of the country doesn't exist. You just don't really realise it until you actually start finding it. You know, and if it's not TV shows, it will be films, or if it's not films, it will be music. Like there will just be something that you'll find. Also, like don't be afraid of watching old films, because I think old films are like, you know, you can find some hidden gems there. Like that's the kind of thing you gotta. That's the kind of things you gotta be prepared to go around. You know, it's a film that's made 50 years ago, but is in the language I want to learn. Okay, great. Let's see how it is. So that's something that's worth remembering. So anyway, some of this sounds kind of too good to be true, I realise, but I really do think this is the best way to learn comprehension. You're not going to comprehend the language very well if you don't understand it. This is, I'll tell this story time and time again, but you know, my great-grandfather, he went to Italy during the war, like to fight against the fascist government, and they sort of conquered Italy through North Africa. And when they invaded Italy, the Allies invaded Italy, he was sort of called up to work in this hotel, whereby he would basically organise the troops who were staying at this hotel. And he was like, right, well, I'm stuck in Italy for a few months by the looks of things. I'm going to learn Italian. And he bought a bunch of Italian grammar books, and every day after he finished his work, he would go down to his bedroom and study Italian for an hour. And he got absolutely nowhere with it, guys. And he said that meanwhile, all his troops who were sort of under his control would go down to the bars and just pick up Italian women who were living there, like local Italian girls, and they would all get fluent in the language. And yeah, it's a funny story, but I think that is really what language learning is about, is finding the sort of path where it's enjoyable to learn it. And just going back to like finding content in the language, like if you really can't find content in the language and you really want to learn this language, you think this language is really cool, it's some really obscure language that they don't have content in the language, and your heart's really set on that language and you don't want to learn any other language, consider moving there. Honestly, like I think that is, you know, it's a sort of drastic choice of things to do, but if your heart's really set on it, then that is the best way you're going to learn it. And obviously it's going to be difficult with jobs and stuff, you know, obviously people have commitments, but, you know, it'll be an adventure, and like, read the 4-hour work week, it'll tell you how to do it. But anyway, that's topic for another video. This is how you're going to learn it, basically. Like, the grinding attitude, like, it sounds way too good to be true, but I just think grinding out a language, you're not really going to learn it that way. Now, if you want to understand the grammar of the language, you want to understand really high literature, you know, you want to write essays about the language, and, you know, you have a sort of grammatical curiosity in it, then absolutely you're going to need to grind at it. But if your aim is just to understand the language, it's like, it's fine to say it, I know it's so weird, but it's not, it doesn't come from grinding, it just comes from consuming content you enjoy. And well, you might say, well, I really want to learn language in a short space of time, can't I just grind it out? Like, the results will come quick enough, guys. They really will. So anyway, on top of this, if you can find content that is within the 60 to 80% range, then choose that content. As long as you're really genuinely interested in it. But it's really not a priority, guys. It's really not a priority, guys. So yeah, I hope some of this makes sense, and I hope there's some lessons you can take away from it. Yeah, it's really a game changer if you embrace this method. I mean, I'm learning Italian at the moment, and I was, like I was saying, I was reading this book, and I was just like, there's no fucking way I'm going to learn Italian if I read this book. My brain's just not geared up to it. You know, I was listening to podcasts in Italian, I was like, would I listen to this podcast if I wasn't learning the language? No, I wouldn't. So what's the point of me listening to it? However, you know, Italy has an amazing history of film. There are so many great films from Italy. So watching half an hour of a film every day, or an Italian series or something of that ilk, that will get me in that flow state. And honestly, I can see the results already. I know this is being extreme, but I think I'll be pretty near native comprehension. Not speaking, but I'll be pretty near native comprehension at the time in about 3 months. I think I'll be pretty close to it. So that's kind of how quick the results are if you're doing this properly. So anyway, hope you guys found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.